Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is such a pleasure to have you join us on this very special webinar. And we are so thrilled to have you be here this morning with us on Monday morning, 11 a.m. We know it's kind of the beginnings of the week, the hustle and bustle of the grind. So we certainly appreciate you taking the time to be with us and join world-renowned Dr. Bill Anton as we dive into the 5 hacks of leadership. So it's so interesting because when we think of leadership, that there's many different ways to kind of cut that pie that we've all been told through the years, right? But nothing that is backed by hard science, right? There's so much that has been marketed and so much that has been pushed out there. But when we start thinking about the science behind leadership and what really matters when it comes to influence, when it comes to setting the bar high for our team and doing our part to push that ball forward so they can reach that bar. It's a very unique thing. So it's such a privilege for us to be here with you and have Dr. Bill Anton shed his insight and his expertise through CEO effectiveness and what it is that he has learned at the 5 main things to consider when we're hacking that leadership code. So Dr. Bill Anton, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Yeah, such a pleasure, such a pleasure. So Dr. Anton, before we kind of dive into the nuts and bolts of leadership and the 5 things that you have found that hack the leadership code, so to speak, tell us a little bit about yourself and CEO effectiveness and what has kind of pushed you to the point and the expertise that you have in truly being world-renowned when it comes to being effective in human behavior and how we persuade and influence others. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, my first introduction to leadership was when I was 27, and I actually became a counseling center director at a major university.
Okay.
And I was 27. I had a staff of 48 psychologists, psychiatrists, and reading clinicians, and some other individuals on the staff. And the next youngest person was 42. So
at 27.
Right. And you can imagine how thrilled they were
I'm
to
sure.
have me as their leader. So as I evolved in the organization, I ended up being part of an associate vice president group. And in my particular area, we had about 500 people, pretty high level people. And we met on a weekly basis and, for a period of years, 6, 7 years. And we read 150 books on organizational effectiveness, leadership, and various other kinds of organization leadership related topics. And as a result of that, I really developed an awareness that my training as a clinical psychologist is really not readily available to the business world.
Yeah.
And so what happens is we end up listening to people that initially make sense to us, and we limit our ability to be all that we can be, especially in terms of achieving results through others, which is fundamentally the basis of leadership.
Outstanding. So at 27 years of age, you were thrown into a massive leadership role.
Yeah.
Over time, cultivated through self-study, in addition to being a PhD in clinical psychology, and I believe you have an expertise in psychotherapy as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm also a certified psychoanalyst, which is it's another 5 years, but it's deep learning about yourself, which again gave me some insight into what leaders and CEOs really need to do if they want to have the level of influence over the people that report to them and that further the values and the interest and the strategic direction of their company.
So when we think about influence and leadership, what have you found over the years? Because I know you had a clinical practice and you continue to have a clinical practice. Is that correct?
Yeah, except now I'm mostly focused on executive coaching with CEOs.
Okay.
But earlier I had a broad ranging clinical practice.
Okay. So with the expertise that you've cultivated to date, and you have worked with pretty big players in the business and corporate world, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And I understand because of the nature of what it is that you do, there's a high element of confidentiality that's involved with that, as there should be.
Yep.
But it doesn't take away from the fact that it's allowed you to kind of sharpen your blade, so to speak, and being able to work with some very high level issues of folks that represent perhaps even like Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 100 companies.
Yep.
So running into very large and grandiose issues, not just within the CEO themselves, but folks they have to interact with, that is something you're very well versed in. Is that correct?
That's correct. Direct reports are an important part of the CEO's team. And how they function is a result of how the CEO functions. And our job is to ensure that CEOs, leadership teams function optimally. And we defined optimally maybe a little differently than traditional business logic might define it.
Interesting. I definitely want to touch more on that and hear more about your thoughts. So let's dive in, because here's the thing. I know CEO effectiveness, it is everything having to do with the very top of the leadership pool, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that there are not lessons or things that you cannot do for folks who perhaps are mid-management or an executive vice president level. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Direct reports to the CEO we've worked with them as a team, as individuals. Sometimes I'll work with the CEO, another member of our team in a totally different area. We'll work with one of the direct reports. We have expertise in influencing culture. And so there are a lot of things we can do. And we're also even interested in leadership and executive health, which is a really important area for the future. Because if your body isn't functioning optimally, you're not going to have the energy and the resources and actually the emotional stability to cope with the endless barrage of demands and issues that get brought to your table.
Outstanding. So for those of you who are tuned in or are watching, it's not just necessarily about the CEO or the C-suite, right? There's many other facets of components. Anyone who is in a role of leadership or influence, there is something of value that CEO effectiveness can bring to the board. So let's dive into the leadership hack, right? Because I know you've had this algorithm, right, that you cracked into, right, over a very successful career in psychology and human behavior. But when we think about leadership, right, let's start. What is the first thing that you want folks who are watching that they need in order to hack that leadership code to be an effective leader?
Well, I believe it begins with you, the leader. And I would say that probably the most important thing is to have objective inner clarity. Now, there are a lot of people that think they have inner clarity, that believe they know themselves. For example, the person with a chip on their shoulder believes they have inner clarity and that everybody is just aching for a fight. And all they have to do is hear the right words and they're off to a fight or an altercation. So inner clarity, objective inner clarity, means that your inner clarity is based on a connection with your frontal cortex, with your prefrontal lobes. It's not based on your defenses. And so that means that you have to learn about yourself beyond what people normally call self-awareness, or even emotional intelligence has its limitations. So the more you know yourself objectively, the more you see others objectively, and the more others are free to be themselves and to offer themselves their energy, their creativity, their passionate commitment to the objectives of your organization. All those things are a function of inner objective clarity on the part of the person at the top.
So inner clarity, right? So what is one thing, for the folks that are watching right now, what is one thing that they can do today to help them gain an enhanced inner clarity?
Well, I'll even tell you two things.
Oh, two? We'll take it.
Yeah. Number one, everyone is capable of maybe spending 5 minutes a day on meditation. Now, what meditation does is it allows all of the information coming into your brain through hormones, through the spinal cord, all of the kind of information that coalesces in your brain, it allows it to get to where it needs to be, which is the executive center of your brain. And just 5 minutes a day of attention focusing. And it takes a lot of practice, and don't be discouraged if you start to meditate and you say, oh, I have all these thoughts coming through my mind. You simply sort of whiz them away as you would take a mosquito and sort of swish them away from yourself. So anyway, I think that's a really important thing that everyone can do. The second thing is interesting. Almost any situation we face, we know that there's a habitual response. There's a response that allows us to be comfortable. And then at the same time, there's a more difficult response. Not a crazy response, not a risky response, but a more difficult response. It might be having a difficult conversation with someone. It might be talking to someone you're angry by identifying your anger as independent of what they did. And so doing the harder thing on a habitual basis, whenever you're faced with a decision, is this, it's sort of like, do I want to eat an ice cream sundae or do I want to go to the gym? Well, probably the ice cream sundae is not the more difficult thing in that situation. Well, the same applies to physical health, psychological health, interpersonal functioning. The more we allow doing the harder thing to be our default, the more effective we become and the more inner clarity we create.
Outstanding. Okay. So from an inner clarity perspective, a little bit of meditation, right? Start off with baby steps and then choosing the harder decision.
Right. When you're faced, when you're at the road, at the fork in the road less traveled is often the more difficult road to take. But in the long run, it enlarges your access to your intellectual potential, your emotional potential, and your ability to persuade and to really be a model for others to model after in your organization.
Fantastic. Okay, so inner clarity. So, so that's the first hack, so to speak, right? Second hack.
Okay, the second hack is that I think any effective organization has to be one where everyone in the organization shares the same basic core values. And the core values and the different values that people bring to the table aren't always crystal clear at the beginning. And so I think it begins, if you were just like starting a new company or trying to exponentially accelerate an existing company, I think it starts with conversations where people talk about their inner truth, the things that are important to them, where they see themselves in 5 or 10 years. And then you sort of take the common denominator of all of those values and you go back and forth and you broaden and you narrow value concepts that incorporate all the people in the team. Now, occasionally there may be people in the team that just simply don't fit in. And that's where you have to make a difficult decision. And that's where you sometimes have to do the harder thing. But if you have a team that's aligned on the basis of values, then what you're going to find is the people that aren't are going to deselect themselves, and they're going to actually make your job easier. And so ultimately, as they say in EOS, you need the right person in the right position at the right time. And that's not easy to achieve if the person at the top doesn't enjoy inner objective clarity.
Wow, that's profound. So shared values is a very important element when we're thinking about being able to effectively lead others and having that open style of communication, making sure that's shared.
It's critical, and it really needs to precede the shared vision for the organization, which needs to precede the mission for the organization, and on down to tangible, accountable results.
Outstanding. Okay, so hack number 2 is shared values, right? So hack number 3.
Hack number 3 is that the commitment to the growth of the organization needs to be aligned with the commitment to the growth of each individual in the organization.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. You don't just have an organization that's committed to growth. You have an organization that understands that everyone in the organization's commitment to growth is really the most effective way to influence the growth of the organization. And there's a quote that I love, and it's one that's it's stated like this, that commitment to growth is a function of everyone really being dedicated to the full development of themselves. And unless there's a commitment to growth, there's no commitment to the organization. And so as you develop each individual in the organization, which becomes easier if the people at the top of the leadership team and the core team really begin to see themselves objectively, then you see what's needed. And so commitment to the organization then becomes a function of commitment to the growth of every individual in the organization. And where this is not possible, then the wrong individual is in the wrong position. So that means you either have to change the position the individual's in, as they would say in the great work on EOS, or you might actually want to find another position within the organization if that's workable.
So commitment to growth. So I think about this from an entrepreneur and a business owner perspective. how do I know how to find the right people? Right. So if I own a company and I'm looking and I'm hiring, or I'm the director or VP, whatever the case is, and I'm looking for the right talent, how do I know how to find the right type of person who would be committed to the growth?
Well, that also starts off with objective self knowledge on the part of the person at the top or the person making the decision. But there are many tools that you can use. Like, for example, in COE, we have a number of objective assessment tools where we can actually measure things like commitment, emotionality, openness, agreeableness, and that type of thing, so that we can know, for example, before hiring an individual, whether they have the ability and the psychological personality characteristics to really allow them to be committed to something beyond themselves and to believe in something beyond themselves and to actually dedicate their energy to an organization beyond their own personal immediate self needs. So we can objectify that, but I can tell you, if the person that they're reporting to or the person at the head of the organization doesn't enjoy inner clarity, then that's going to trickle all the way down the organization. And you're going to have a situation where hammers hire nails, when in fact it would be in their best interest to hire other hammers, because then there would be a greater likelihood that they would learn about themselves. And they might have a difficult situation in the short term, but they would at least have the kind of friction, which I would call creative tension in an organization, that would force them to broaden their insights into the way that they function and the influence that they have on others.
Creative tension in an organization. I like that. So it's something that we should strive to have.
Absolutely.
Okay, very good.
You want creative tension, because without creative tension, there is no energy. And if the leader is constantly evolving their awareness and their knowledge of themselves, then their creative tension is going to be heightened. And remember, the more you know yourself, the more others are free to be themselves in your presence. And only if you're yourself, and only if you see your own personal growth and development as aligned with the organization that you're part of, are you going to offer your heart and soul. It's like, you can't force somebody to love you, or you can't force somebody to give you their all. They have to believe that you and what you stand for, value-wise, organization-wise, and leadership style, are worthy of that level of commitment.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, so commitment to growth, and how powerful that word commitment is, and everything that goes into it, which really starts from the top down.
Absolutely.
All right, very good. So that's hack number 3. All right, so hack number 4. What does hack number 4 consist of?
Okay, well, I think a lot of organizations see themselves as functioning at the team level. They have high performance teams assigned to certain things, and then they have relationships between teams. In fact, I love Stanley Crystal's book, Team of Teams, because he really talks about how teams can interact with each other. And in his book, even though he's talking about the military and being, a very well regarded and highly respected general, he understands that without self-knowledge on leadership and without free communication where people are allowed to express what they truly believe, are you ever going to get the level of commitment you need for timely responses at the right situation to the right degree. And just like that can win wars or win battles, it can also move organizations beyond what they ever believed was possible. And one of the things that happens is the leader that, even though I said a person that knows themselves allows others to be more themselves in their presence, a team that's functioning at the level of dialogue, where people aren't holding back, where they aren't holding back what they think of other team members or their reservations about organizational direction. But once they function at that level and only present their ideas as their ideas, not as truths that everyone should adopt, then they are open to change and to growth within themselves. And as the team becomes dynamic, as the team becomes able to tolerate creative tension, then you have a high performance team that not only can offer great value to the overall organization, but they're also willing to allow other teams and to be high performance teams and to interact with each other for an overarching goal. There was an old study by Gordon Allport where they had a summer camp, and they had juvenile delinquents that were at war with each other on the streets of a major city. And what Alport did is he came up with a superordinate goal that they couldn't, it was, obviously a goal that involved physical risk and other things. And the only way they could achieve the goal was to cooperate. And he called it a superordinate goal because members of both teams had to give up something and adopt something to win the overall strategy for what it was they were trying to achieve. And so I think that's a good lesson for team learning. Operate at the level of dialogue. You already have people that have been selected to be part of the team. You have the right person in the right organization, and everyone on the team is excited about achieving what the organization stands for because they see their own goals and their own values as aligned with the organization's values. And as they interact with each other, they interact as open adults that are willing to change their minds or even to believe something very strongly. And when they realize that the team consensus goes against their belief, they're willing to adopt the consensus, even though it's not how they feel about that particular decision, because they have enough connection with other people on the team, they have enough belief in the values of the organization that their own immediate needs become second to the overall organization. And it's a little bit like, maturity.
Absolutely. So for the viewers who are out there, if they wanted to know one thing they could do right now, implement in their organization to encourage or enhance communication to get it to the level of dialogue, right? What would be the first step you would want them to take?
I would say to find a way to speak your truth, even if it goes against the direction of some initiative or whatever, but also express your willingness to be persuaded by the overall direction. So you're showing that you're flexible, that you're open, that you have powerful beliefs, but that you're not so invested in your beliefs that you're not able to take in new information. And the person that has objective inner clarity is going to be much more likely to be persuaded by a consensus, though that isn't always the case. One of our team members, Peter Berardi, is a former Navy SEAL commander. And one of the things that happens in Navy SEAL training where life and death is involved is you have much less deference to authority, so that you could have the highest ranking person that could be an admiral on a team mission, and he could be, there could be 30 other people all the way down to the newest Navy SEAL, and everyone is allowed to express their opinion. Now, this is different than other areas of the military, and the reason it's different is that the Navy SEALs have found out that if everyone is given a voice, and if everyone is allowed to express their voice, that is enough to allow them to embrace a mission that may go against their position, because at least they were heard and other people listened to what they said. And then once a decision is made for the team, they can give their heart and soul to the mission. And as a result of implementing that strategy within SEAL training, thousands of lives have been saved.
So empowering your team with a voice.
Yeah, just allowing to, just being able to express your voice, to have someone listen to it, and then maybe to disagree and for the consensus to really be in disagreement with your position, puts you in a better position than if you had to suppress your voice and just go along with some top-down decision, knowing that maybe it creates too much risk. You might have an insight that no one else on the team has because let's say you had a background in scuba diving and you recognize that the tanks that are going to be used aren't going to contain sufficient oxygen, or they weigh too much, and you're the only team member that really has that insight. If you're forced to remain silent, people would die.
Absolutely. So hack for communication and pushing it to the point of dialogue within your team. Right. All right. So the final and last hack, right, for our time today, right? What does it consist of?
Well, I would call it, and this is, I had this insight given to me a long time ago by one of my mentors and close friends, Ron Fleischer, and that is that any organization that is going to be functioning as a learning organization. That is, any organization that is going to be able to continually evolve its capacity to create its own future is going to have to enjoy an alignment between management, the workers in the organization, the people that actually are closest to the processes, and the customer. If those three things are misaligned, or any two of them are misaligned, you're not optimally serving your customers, and you're also not deriving optimal benefit from all of the things that we've talked about up to this point. Those are all thresholds that ordinarily, if they were followed very carefully and at a very high level, would just generally result in alignment. Because, for example, if the person at the top knows themselves as they truly are, then they see others as they truly are. They see how to develop others, how to make them more productive, how to make them more engaged. And others are willing to listen to them and to model after them because they feel more comfortable in the presence of somebody that isn't imposing their defenses on them. And so then the logic of that sterling kind of interpersonal relationship begins to be affected in the organization. And ultimately then the organization, the sales department, the marketing department realize that they have to offer customers the same thing that they offer their own internal customers, which are the people that get the job done for the company.
So alignment clearly is very important.
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. So to kind of bring a full circle for everyone who's watching, right? So the 5 hacks, and what do they consist of? So first and foremost, inner clarity. Right. So achieving that. So a quick thing that you can do in the office or at home is meditate. Right. In addition to meditation, the second
is doing the harder thing.
Doing the harder thing.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Right. Then number 2, having shared values. Right. Making sure that the values within the team, yourself, being true to yourself, as well as making sure the team members are being true to themselves, and having an open dialogue and discussion.
Right. About that. And that your inner values are aligned with the organization's values. If they're not, you're in the wrong organization, and you're never going to be able to give your best, no matter what kinds of training you get or what techniques are used or who comes in to consult with your company. You're only going to be able to get what people are willing to offer voluntarily. And that's a mistake a lot of organizations make, is they substitute training for excellence. And just as an aside, I would define competition and excellence as relatively incompatible. Because I would say competition is taking the non-aware part of yourself, or the non-self-knowledgeable part of yourself, and trying to best someone else who is functioning at the same level. Where I believe that excellence, and if this happened throughout the organization, you would be competitive as an outcome, but not as a goal. And that is, it is the reduction of your functional ability, that is what you're actually able to do and what you're capable of doing. And the good leader sees that gap in themselves and in every person in the organization and knows how to close that gap. And when you do that, you then enjoy what some authors have called the competitive advantage. And once you have a competitive advantage, then barriers to entry are hell to overcome.
Very good, very good. So the third is commitment to growth, right? Making sure that is a transparent element within the entire team, as well as ourselves, and being our true self and being committed to that growth. And then number 4, communication, right? Creating an environment of open dialogue, empowering your team with a voice, and being able to listen, right? And being able to work through whatever it is that they feel would be a positive contribution to the organization.
To speak your truth as an adult, with the awareness that you're part of an organization that is larger than yourself.
Fantastic. And then finally, element number 5 is alignment, right? Making sure that everything lines up, but starting with ourselves, right? Making sure that is there.
Alignment is the dessert. If you've done everything else right, you're going to have an aligned organization. And if you have an aligned organization, you're going to have competitive advantage. And no one else is going to be able to compete with somebody that operates at this level of insight. And that's really what CEOE is all about, bringing something to the business world that is really offered very rarely, if at all.
Outstanding. So for those of you who are watching, we thank you so much for the time. And we do have a very special treat for you. If you go and find your way to our website, www.ceoeffectiveness.com, scroll to the bottom of the page, you will find the 10 steps to CEO success. Click on that link. We made it available to you this morning. Insert your name, your email address, and you will get a copy of a PDF that Dr. Anton himself and team put together that walks you through step by step what it takes and what it means to be a CEO who is effective and who is successful. In addition to that, don't forget to check out his books. The first one is Ascend, which is right behind us. Dr. Anton, that book came out when?
That came out a couple of years ago, yeah.
Outstanding. And you can find the links for Ascend as well as Business Success.
Through Self-Knowledge.
Through Self-Knowledge, which is on the website as well. So please check out ceoeffectiveness.com, download that PDF, get 10 steps ahead in being successful and effective as a CEO. And thank you so much for your time. Dr. Anton, anything you want to sign off with?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. I know it's valuable.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening.
We appreciate you all. Have a great day. Make it a great week.